Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Yuot. It's Monday, February 8th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees, so our broadcast looks different today and in the near future, as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at WEWE headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. A new case of the Ebola virus has been detected in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and the infected person has died. Edward Barron has the details.
A new case of the Ebola virus has been detected in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo near the city of Butembo, and the infected person has died, the health ministry said on Sunday. A woman was found with symptoms of the deadly virus in the town of Yemen on February 1st. She died in hospital in Butembo 2 days later. She was married to a man who had contracted the virus in a previous outbreak. The announcement potentially marks the start of Congo's 12th Ebola outbreak since the virus was discovered near the Ebola River in 1976. It comes nearly 3 months after Congo announced the end to its 11th outbreak hundreds of miles away in the west, which infected 130 people and killed 55. That outbreak overlapped with an earlier one in the east that killed more than 2,200 people, the second most in the disease's history. The emergence of more cases could complicate efforts to eradicate COVID-19, which has infected over 23,000 people and killed almost 700 in Democratic Republic of Congo. Congo's equatorial forests are a natural reservoir for the Ebola virus, which causes severe vomiting and diarrhea and is spread through contact with bodily fluids.
That was Edward Barron of Reuters reporting. The United Nations Children's Agency is deploying additional staff and preparing to transport medical equipment and supplies to the affected area and assist efforts to track and trace all those who came into contact with a dead person in the surrounding area. UNICEF is also working closely with local health authorities to support community mobilization, control infection mechanisms, and decontamination activities. Staff from UNICEF's office in Beni is already on site in Butembo to support the North Kivu Health Division. Somali officials say 12 members of Somalia's security forces were killed and 2 others wounded on Sunday following a powerful roadside explosion in the central state of Galmudug. The attack occurred near the village of El Dere, 28 kilometers west of Dusamareb, during a security operation. Dusamareb is 510 kilometers north of Mogadishu. The chief of the intelligence agency in the town of Dusamareb was among those killed. The state's information minister confirmed to VOA. The Al-Shabaab terrorist group is claiming responsibility for the attack. It was the second confrontation between Al-Shabaab and Somali government forces outside Dusamareb in the space of 3 days. On Friday, 7 militants were killed by government forces after mortars were fired into the town as political leaders held a meeting on election management. An alliance of Somali opposition parties is proposing the creation of a national council of lawmakers, opposition leaders, and civil society to govern the war-ravaged East African nation after the president's term expired on Monday, with no clear plan for succession, according to Reuters. A Somali security analyst warns the power vacuum and divisions between political leaders is a boost to the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab insurgency, citing a spate of recent attacks in a peaceful part of the country. The opposition alliance says it will reject any attempt to extend the term of President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed and suggested the council could elect a transitional leader to govern until a new president can be chosen by lawmakers. There was no immediate comment from the presidency. South Africa has suspended use of AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine after research showed it was less effective at preventing moderate and mild infections from a variant that has been driving the country's second wave. David Doyle has the details.
South Africa has suspended use of a coronavirus vaccine developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University amid concerns over its efficacy against a variant of the virus that has been driving a second wave of infections. Health Minister Zweli Mkhize saying on Sunday that the government would await advice from scientists on how best to proceed.
So it's a temporary issue that we have to hold on to AstraZeneca. It is temporary until we figure out these issues. What are the next steps supposed to be? When we know those steps, then of course we bring it back.
Prior to widespread circulation of the variant, known as 501Y.V2, researchers said the AstraZeneca vaccine was showing efficacy of around 75%. But analysis of infections by the new variant shows the vaccine only reducing the risk of moderate or mild infection by 22%. Researchers said the figure was not statistically significant due to the trial's design, but it is well below the benchmark of at least 50% regulators have set for vaccines to be considered effective. The study did not assess whether the vaccine helped prevent severe COVID-19 because it involved mostly relatively young adults. But on Monday, the trial's lead investigator, Professor Shabir Mahdi, said there was still some hope that the vaccine would prevent severe disease.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. The administration of U.S. President Joe Biden announced in January that U.S. would join COVAX, the global effort by the World Health Organization and other groups to ensure that lower-income countries have access to the coronavirus vaccine. But as the White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara reports, the U.S. has not pledged any more funding beyond the $4 billion approved by Congress in December.
The Global Coronavirus Vaccine Initiative, COVAX, aims to deliver 2 billion doses to people in 92 lower-income countries by the end of 2021.
It is a strategy to rapidly contain the pandemic, save lives, protect health care systems, and restore the global economy. It's based on human rights principles of equity and epidemiologic evidence from the pandemic.
The U.S. joined COVAX on January 21st, the same day it rejoined the World Health Organization. President Joe Biden reiterated the message Thursday.
We've also re-engaged with the World Health Organization. That way we can build better global preparedness to counter COVID-19, as well as detect and prevent future pandemics, because there will be more.
That's a departure from his predecessor, who withdrew from WHO in July 2020.
Because they have failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms.
But Biden's administration has provided little detail on the scope and scale of U.S. commitment beyond the $4 billion funding approved by Congress in December for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, one of the co-leaders of COVAX.
We have reiterated our commitment to COVAX. I don't have any additional funding, though, to announce today.
To meet its target, COVAX says it needs $4.9 billion in addition to the $2.1 billion it has already raised. It's also dealing with vaccine scarcity as wealthy countries build up stockpiles for their own populations. 40 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine have been promised to COVAX, but only 1.2 million are available in the first quarter of 2021.
We encourage every manufacturer to make the largest number of doses they can available early so that we can make sure that we get equitable distribution going.
In addition to the Pfizer-BioNTech shots, COVAX will distribute 336 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine in the first half of this year.
There was vaccines that they were clearly available, that they had some control over, and started to make those allocation projections primarily so countries could begin to plan. They're not finished, and so we're going to see much more from COVAX about more vaccines going to those countries with the opportunity to reach initially 3% of the population, but with a larger goal of 20%.
The hope is that with this initial forecast from COVAX, countries can begin their immunization strategies, including storage, distribution, and how to address vaccine hesitancy. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
As more people get the COVID-19 vaccine, healthcare experts are tackling the issue of how someone can prove they've been vaccinated. Licia Bacalet has more in this story, narrated by Anna Rice.
A short form, a number of health-related questions, a quick shot, and then a vaccine card. That's the standard process when someone gets a COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S. The vaccination card is a small paper that the health professional fills out by hand. Maryland school teacher Maral Sivaslan got one recently.
She told me I can't lose it. I have to have it, and I have to make sure I take it with me when I get my second dose.
The vaccination card is a reminder that in 3 weeks it's time for the second dose, but also a backup for the nation's electronic record keeping.
So everybody who gets a COVID-19 vaccine in the U.S. in the state that they're in, that the information gets electronically put into the registry.
But Tan says he believes the vaccination certificate can easily be falsified and wants a new system the World Health Organization is considering.
I think there has to be validation. There has to be a way to validate that information, which is why I think having something that is digitally secure, which is what the SMART certificate that WHO is looking at, is needed.
The World Health Organization already has a so-called yellow card, which essentially serves as an official vaccination record needed to enter certain countries. The idea is to do the same for COVID-19 vaccinations. The International Air Transportation Association is suggesting a vaccination app.
Travel Pass is essentially an app which will be designed to be downloaded on a customer's phone, either directly from Apple iOS or Google Play for Android, or through an airline's app. And eventually that would allow a customer to be able to digitally identify themselves.
The International Economic Forum is also working on developing a similar digital passport, an app called Common Pass. It's an IBM platform to store all the medical data.
So in the US, everybody is required to send the vaccination activities to the state. And the state keeps this information into a registry. And what we are working on now is connecting the platform to the registries, so we can also expose that information back to you.
But relying on an app worries human rights activists who stress that not everyone has a smartphone.
Connecting vaccination with the need to have an expensive smartphone doesn't serve civil liberties or civil rights purposes.
Developers say the apps should be fully functional by the end of 2021. Officials say a lot depends on how fast vaccinations are administered around the world and when countries reopen their borders. Felicia Bacalets in Washington, NRI's WEWE News.
The pro-democracy group Freedom House has released a report detailing how countries such as China, Rwanda, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Russia, and Turkey systematically employ violence and intimidation against exiles and diasporas to silence dissent beyond their borders. WEWE's diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
President Joe Biden had an urgent message for State Department diplomats and staff members around the world.
America is back. Diplomacy is back. You are the center of all that I intend to do.
Biden reversed course from former President Donald Trump's support for the Saudi-led military intervention in Yemen's civil war.
This war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales.
Biden is creating the post of a U.S. envoy to Yemen and has named career diplomat Tim Linderking to the job. One expert said this marks a significant shift.
Having a U.S. diplomat there, I think, sends a powerful signal that the U.S. is truly committed to conflict resolution and wants to see something happen.
Biden had another major announcement on accepting refugees from deadly conflicts like the one in Yemen.
I'm approving an executive order to begin the hard work of restoring our refugee admissions program to help meet the unprecedented global need.
Biden condemned the coup in Myanmar and called on the military to relinquish power, release civilian leaders, and restore internet service and communications. The president also announced a global review of all U.S. forces around the world and froze Trump's planned troop withdrawals from Germany. Katoulas said the move reassures Germany and other close U.S. allies in Europe after what he says were unpredictable actions by Trump.
I think what this move does is sort of send U.S. foreign policy back to the norms where the U.S. is working closely with allies, especially Democratic allies.
Biden told State Department employees he values their expertise and will never target them or politicize their work. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, Ivory Coast females take on the rough game of rugby. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. This week, Washington will tackle two important issues: the $1.9 trillion economic relief package President Joe Biden has proposed, and the Senate impeachment trial of his immediate predecessor, Donald Trump. Michelle Quinn reports.
The U.S. Capitol, the scene of much drama in recent weeks, will again be the center of attention as lawmakers debate the economic stimulus amid the coronavirus pandemic and hold arguments during the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. Congressional committees will begin the work of crafting legislation on components of President Joe Biden's stimulus plan, which would provide aid to families, workers, businesses, and local governments. Many Republicans argue that the plan is too big and not narrowly targeted to address only the issues that have arisen because of the pandemic. Democrats say that the package needs to be passed fast, given the nation's economic crisis.
The bottom line is we've got to support as many Americans as we can, as robustly as we can, and as quickly as we can. Time is of the essence.
Trump's impeachment trial will take place in the Senate in the afternoons on one article of impeachment: that his words and actions led to the incitement of an insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, an allegation that Trump has denied. Senator Roger Wicker, a Republican from Mississippi, called the trial a meaningless messaging partisan exercise.
The charge, George, in the impeachment, in the one article impeachment, is that he singularly incited a riot to invade the Capitol, and I do not think that will be proved in the trial, no.
With the Senate divided evenly between 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats, 17 Republicans would have to join Democrats to convict the president, a high bar to clear. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
Democrats and Republicans are laying out their strategies ahead of Tuesday's start to the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. VOA Steve Reddish explains what is behind the arguments for both sides.
Last month's attack on the U.S. Capitol prompted the House of Representatives, led by Democrats with the support of 10 Republicans, to impeach then-President Donald Trump for an unprecedented second time. House Democrats, who will prosecute the case before the jury of U.S. senators, say Trump incited the attack that killed 5 people, including a Capitol police officer. And they will use Trump's own words and video from the riot to try to sway the jury.
In terms of the strategy that the Democratic Party is using, which is to say, this guy is a threat. He is still a threat. He is currently a threat. He was a threat. The insurrection is a result of his violent incitement rhetoric.
Jennifer Murcia is a professor of American political rhetoric at Texas A&M University.
So if they can activate people's memories of the event and they can, sort of remind them of the fear that they felt and reactivate that fight or flight response, they might find that they're able to persuade, even beyond the partisanship.
With the 100-member Senate evenly split, Democrats need 17 Republicans to join them to vote to convict former President Trump. But the word former is at the crux of the Republican strategy.
If the accused is no longer president, where is the constitutional power to impeach him? Private citizens don't get impeached. Impeachment is for removal from office. And the accused here has already left office.
Republicans lost a vote on the trial's constitutionality, But the 55-45 vote leaves Democrats well shy of the 67 votes needed.
I think they really are just trying to keep this at the level of procedure. This is simply a procedural question at this point. We're not going to relitigate, this question of violence and the insurrection and whether Trump's at fault or not.
And Murcia says social media's silencing of Trump may work against the Democrats' strategy.
They really will be trying to use fear appeal, and make the argument about safety and that he's a clear and present danger. And I think the fact that he's been deplatformed really actually hurts that argument, because if he was still online, he would still be making all of those same arguments. He would still be that clear and present danger.
House Democrats formally requested that Trump testify at his impeachment trial set to start Tuesday. When asked if he will testify, lawyers for the former president said no. Steve Reddish, VOA News, Washington.
A weekly newspaper run by a team of female journalists is thriving in Afghanistan's northern Balkh province, despite threats against journalists in parts of the country. Gul Rahim Niazman from VOA's Afghan service has more in this report, narrated by Bejan Hamdard.
In Mazar-e-Sharif, the capital of Balkh province in Afghanistan's north, the weekly Khurshid Balkh, or Balkh's Sun, covers local and regional news. The outlet, run by all women, shows they can work freely and without assistance, says founder and managing editor Neda Azizi.
I set up this weekly newspaper using my own money and continue to do so at personal expense. If there are any advertisements, that helps me with some of the costs.
Azizi works with two other female journalists. Together, they shatter cultural stereotypes of what a woman's role should be and still report despite a spike in attacks against media. 2020 saw a 26% rise in violence against members of the media, says the Afghan Journalist Safety Committee. The paper is growing more popularity, although Azizi says it can be hard to get people to pay for it.
I saw 3 or 4 places where they wanted to receive the weekly on a regular basis, but when we mentioned the financial cost, they did not want to buy the weekly. People want to read, but don't want to pay to read.
Good opportunities exist for women in this province, says Mathiul Rahman Karimi, the province's Director of Cultural and Information.
Balkh is one of the provinces where women have the opportunity to work in various fields, especially in media, where most of the employees of the public and private media organizations are women.
In Balkh, the province has 1 weekly newspaper and 3 radio stations run by female journalists. The number of females working in TV and radio is also relatively high. Rights activists say this helps elevate the voices of all women in the region.
What women face, what women go through, and the violence they face, men don't. That is why it is crucial for women to play an important and valuable role in media.
Despite security threats and cultural challenges, the journalists at Balkh Sun say they will continue to report on important and underreported issues. For Gul Rahim Niazman in Mazar-e-Sharif, Afghanistan, Bejan Hamdard, VOA News.
Tens of thousands of people in Myanmar took to the streets over the weekend to protest a military coup and call for the release of the country's democratically elected leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. VOA's Arash Arabasadi reports.
Large protests took place in cities like Yangon, Nay Pyi Taw, and Mandalay in the wake of last week's military coup. Aung San Suu Kyi is a protest leader.
A military coup is the violation of our democracy and human rights. It also insults the will of the people. That's why we are against the military coup. It's important to honor the election result. That's why we come here staging protests.
The protests follow a week in which the military claimed election fraud, arrested members of the government elected in November, and cut off access to the internet. Internet service was reported to have been restored Sunday. Protesters showing the three-fingered salute, a symbol against the coup, demanded the release of de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi. They wore red in solidarity with Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy Party, or NLD. The military coup has been condemned by U.S. President Joe Biden and other world leaders who have called for the elected government to be restored to power. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
In our sports news, in Ivory Coast, girls and women increasingly are taking to the rugby field. Mark Kamara reports on how girls are tackling this rough and tumble game. WEWE's Carol Gunsberg narrates.
As a girl, Daman Sanatha dreamed of playing rugby professionally, but didn't have the money or access to training. Determined that no other girls should be kept from the game, 4 years ago she began coaching Sabroko, a women's team in Bingerville. Sanatha brought the team to play at the National Institute for Youth and Sports in Marcory, a college in suburban Abidjan.
I was a former player. I stayed on staff to supervise the girls. I would like the sisters to go as far as possible, ensure that there is a place for girls in this sport.
Rugby can be a rough contact sport, but 15-year-old Berta Assista, who has a different coach, is fine with that.
I started rugby thanks to my friend. She invited me to come and watch how it is played. On the second day, I put on athletic clothes to train a little. Since that day, I have loved rugby.
Isabelle Yeboah, secretary of the Ivorian Rugby Federation's Women's Commission, says it's about time women players are getting recognized.
Girls have been training with clubs for a very long time.
The Rugby Federation organizes an annual tournament among clubs. It's also a showcase to find promising players who can go on to play for the national team.
So we are doing a championship to select the good female players, let them form a team, and also participate in international competitions.
What's clear is that many girls who want to play rugby now can get the chance. Of 21 official clubs in Ivory Coast, more than half are for females. For Mama Camera in Marcory, Côte d'Ivoire, Carol Gunsberg, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for watching.
Ili kuwa mwanafamilia bora wa Global TV, usisahau kusubscribe, like, kushare na kucomment. Baada ya kusubscribe, bonyeza alama ya kengele ili kupata taarifa kwa kila video inayopanda Global TV Online.